Video games share the engrossing power to let us develop in directions we never thought possible. Whether it's traversing a galaxy far, far away in something like No Man's Sky, or even the simple act of getting up and walking around, something unfortunately not all people can do. They're an avenue to explore, not just other worlds, but other possibilities beyond our comprehension. Being male, being female, being transgendered, being gay, being handicapped, being a superhero, being a space explorer, walks of life that not all of us can be a part of. Growth is fundamental in video games, and one aspect of games that exemplifies that kind of player growth is storytelling. But I'm not here to talk about video game stories, that's well-treaded territory for me, I know. And even though I think that a game narrative is a fascinating and ever-evolving concept, I'll leave those discussions to just about all of my other videos. No, today I want to talk about a whole different kind of story. A gameplay story. Let's talk about that. Video games can take you through a world, sure, but what about the act of you going through that world? That's a story in itself, and I'm not just talking about environmental storytelling. I'm talking about the underlying narrative that both the actual player and the player's character experience as the game goes on. It's something often used and is the cornerstone of one of my absolute favorite genres of all time. Let's take a look at it as a system that seems to work like no other, particularly for me, and we'll label it here. Action, adventure, traversal, upgrading, getting better, and then going back to places where you weren't so good but have gotten better since, and now doing dope stuff to get past those roadblocks you hit before kinds of games. For the layman, even if it's a terrible name, let's just call them Metroidvanias because it's still better than whatever the hell I just said. Metroid and Castlevania set the tempo for this genre, and though there was a down period there in the mid to late aughts, they've come back with a vengeance. From Chasm to Axiom Verge to Ori and the Blind Forest, and still more yet to come, every indie developer and their indie uncle have jumped on making the genre as big and bold as it once was. Apparently both Nintendo and Konami aren't interested in stepping into the genre anytime soon. But to be fair, Konami's probably not making any video games ever. Except for Metal Gear Survive, of course. This is a style of game that I'm sickly obsessed with. Maybe part of it feeds that obsession with collecting things, but I think the real tenet here is the feeling it evokes. It's something I noticed while playing Rise of the Tomb Raider, for all intents and purposes, a Metroidvania. That game tells a story, not with its characters, heavens no, but with its gameplay. Yes, a mechanical story, something tactile that actually describes progression. Not in a way you see or hear, like in a normal story, but feel. This story is the curve of the game, and I don't mean a steady increase in difficulty. I mean a steady increase in, let's call it, creative dexterity. You grow as a mechanical resource in conjunction to that world as that mechanical story progresses, and that's awesome. Imagine, if you will, a world where you get better at traversing as you move through it. The process is natural, inherent. It's almost as if you come into the world with limited understanding of it, with just barely the ability to walk or jump. As time goes on, you steadily gain both knowledge and resources that allow you to access more than what you saw on the surface. What I'm saying is, this format, it translates so directly to life that maybe that's why it's so innately satisfying. Sure, the progression of life is less based on sweet space jump abilities and more about knowledge, emotion, and the understanding of people and objects around you. But there is some of that inherent to the Metroidvania experience as well. Let's flash back to the Tomb Raider example. When you get into that world, Lara feels like she knows a little of what she's doing. But of course, they still have to take all of your abilities away because it's a video game. The skills you get, the underwater breather, rope arrows, explosives, they all feel like natural inclusions. They make sense in the world. As you progress, there's a sense of feeling that not only does Lara's confidence grow, which is obvious because she has more tools at her disposal, but the player's confidence grows as well, your own confidence. The two are synonymous, and as you have more at your disposal, you're just naturally going to explore new options as the game goes on. The biggest factor with this idea is context, which as games have gotten bigger and more realistic, it's a growing issue for this genre in particular. It's harder to contextualize something like a sweet space jump if it just doesn't make sense in that world. That's why Rise of the Tomb Raider is the perfect example. Everything has context, it fits, and not only does that context reapply back to Lara and her ability to use new tools, but again, to you as the player, and your dexterous ability to weave weapons and tools into combat and exploration. To jump back to a more titular example, the more abstract Metroid series, there's less of a need for context, let's say. Samus's adventures have the benefits of being very obviously fiction. You have a magic spacesuit. You're probably going to get some cool magical abilities. Leaps of logic like the space jump, jumping infinitely, or super missiles, charged up super beams, they all fit in that context. It's harder to make a modern game that works as well, but Rise of the Tomb Raider really shows it's possible. It's a great example of what's left for us to explore in that genre. There is a second half to this story though, one that you see, but don't quite understand until you dig a little deeper. The world's share of the load. That world is so absolutely critical to making this work though, so let's continue with the story analogy. To have a good story, you need multiple characters. In this case, it's you, the player, then the player character, and then the world. They need to grow and change together. The plot points here are the upgrades you receive along the way, and how they interplay with the characters on stage. The world needs to tell you you can still do the things you need to do, while also implying that there's more below the surface. Metroidvanias are heavy on backtracking, and this is intentional. You pass through an area and let's say you see a red door, a new kind of door that you've never seen before, and of course you know it's something that's beyond your capabilities right now. In context of, say, a Metroid game, this gives the world character. It's established, it exists. It doesn't need you to define it because, hey, it's its own character and a being that has been here before you and presumably will exist after you. That red door tells you that this world doesn't bend to your will. It exists to do its own thing. Just as much in that regard, you have to problem solve and use your abilities to bypass those roadblocks, creating a sort of dance where you're weaving around the limitations of your current abilities. It's great for two reasons. The first being it establishes both the player character and the world as independent from one another. They exist. It isn't a roadblock that was created to stop the player character. It's a roadblock that exists for its own reason. Now, on a design level, it's an incentive to bring you back to this place again someday, but that's more a dialogue between the player and the designer. The other reason is it creates conflict. Again, using my storytelling analogy, any great foil character, any great opposite, plays back against the hero. You can't tell an interesting story if the hero doesn't have any trials to go through. Your toolset evolves as you traverse this world, and the world will show you more and more of its secrets and character if you take the time to actually explore it. The give and take play is crucial here, and there's a balance between implying more below the surface and also showing it. There are plenty of rooms in Super Metroid that not only show you a red door you can't get through right now, but certain walls that can be destroyed by abilities you didn't even know were in the game yet. It makes the realization twofold. You come back later and break that door, but hey, you can do even more beyond that now. It's an evolving relationship. Sure, that's obvious to most folks, because you come into the world with limited access and just grow and grow until you're that far above the challenges your environment can dole out to you. The patented abilities is huge in this. It gives you a preview of where you can be, and then just takes it away from you. Something I love about how Metroid uses the abilities specifically is that when you get all the abilities back that you had at the abilities point, you typically have even more abilities beyond just those stock ones. Metroid Prime is a great example for this. When you finally get the grappling hook back, the final ability you had lost from the brief prologue, you have different beams, different suits, and even more options in your toolset. It goes beyond the initial tease you longed for from the beginning and shows you've grown that much more. That kind of growth has to be organic and natural. Symphony of the Night is such a master at giving you just enough taste and making you want more. There are so few actual abilities and upgrades in that game, and as I've played it recently for the first time, every upgrade you receive is a huge milestone. The longer jump, the transformations you receive in that game, they're game changers. And like I said before, the environment that hinted at how I'd use it later was only the surface. That, and the fact that the entire game functions both right side up and upside down, truly making it one of the coolest world characters in a Metroidvania. Mad props for that. Just like any investment in a relationship, in a story, there are two interplays here. One between you, the player, and the player character, and the other is between the player character and the world, like I said before. As your player character's toolset grows, what you can do in that world with that character grows with it. There's a confidence that is stimulated here, and it makes you more dynamic and more likely to try new things, to discover new areas. The world gives you, the player, hints that there is more below the surface, so why not dig deeper? It makes you feel more dexterous. Again, creative dexterity. And of course, the inversion of difficulty, the going from your player character being weak and fragile to the most dangerous predator in that world, becoming overpowered. It doesn't happen in all video games, but it can almost always happen in a Metroidvania. There are so many optional power-ups that if you take the time to seek them out, you can assure a supply of near infinite ammo and an insurmountable health bar that makes you pretty much unstoppable to any enemy below a boss fight. But that's everything you do giving back to you. You work hard to get stronger, you get rewarded. Again, it's an interplay. It's all part of that growth. Like you're getting little tools that make you better and better, but also make you more confident. It doesn't all happen at once, like any good story. It's spaced out, it's gradual. That's why I look at these not as simple mechanics, gives and takes, but as a true story. Like watching a silent film, there is a story that happens even if it isn't directly yelled at you. A quieter, more subtle one, of the characters in a play growing. This is something felt, not heard. You feel that too, because like I said, the player themselves are also a character in this narrative. Your control, your agency directly affects the feel and shape of this curve. And that's massive to that interaction at the core of video games. So what I'm trying to say here is make another goddamn Metroid game, Nintendo. Hey, I hope you liked this, and if you did, give me a subscribe. Maybe check out my Twitter. I put a lot of work into this show, and this first episode is just a glimpse of some of the topics I'll be talking about. What do you think about Metroidvanias? Am I right about how they illustrate character growth, or has this all just been crazy? Please tell me it hasn't been crazy. Leave it in the comments below, or send me tweets with the hashtag AlexTalks. Alright, so I finally did it. I brought Alex Talks back. I'm super proud of it, and now I just need to end the episode with a proper send-off. Something very me. Oh, I know. In the words of a scholar, a friend, and a total badass. Thanks for watching, and bye, Felicia!
Hey, hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey.